Hello, beautiful souls. Thank you so much for dropping by this video. A warm welcome to everyone. This channel is dedicated to helping people understand the difference between traditional non-duality, called Advaita Vedanta, or called Advaita Vedanta in the Indian version of non-duality, and modernized, watered down, fake, incomplete non-duality called Neo-Advaita. If you'd like to know more about this topic, please click on the link in the chat box or below. So before I hop into today's talk, a very important announcement. I am not a guru. I am not enlightened. I'm not qualified to teach non-duality. So why the heck am I talking about non-duality? I'm actually not going to specifically be teaching about non-duality. I'm going to be teaching about the difference between traditional non-duality and watered down and pseudo non-duality. But why would it matter? What an odd statement. I'm not qualified to teach on non-duality. What on earth does that mean? Well, in traditional non-duality, it's understood that the process that we're engaged in is overcoming Maya. Now, what Maya is, that's a very deep topic, but a very simple way to think about it is that Maya is untrue perception, illusion, that which seems true but is not. So it's actually a very rigorous undertaking, right? It's not just seen through falsehood, it's seen through illusion. So illusion is that which appears to be true, but actually isn't. So in my view, and I'm not alone in this view, most of what's happening today when people are teaching non-duality is there are people who are still caught in Maya, still caught in illusion, still caught in delusion. And the part of the illusion and delusion they're caught in is, I am enlightened and I can teach people, when in fact, neither of those are actually true. So that's why in traditional non-duality, it's considered essential to have a guru, someone who actually can check whether or not you've made it out of Maya, someone themselves who has made it out of Maya, who can, through discernment, tell whether or not you have, and then certify you to teach. So most of what you have nowadays is self-appointed teachers, people who have declared themselves enlightened and declared themselves qualified to teach, which if you think about it, it sounds cool, but it's actually insane when you understand Maya. Interestingly enough, Maya is a little bit like insanity, right? Because insanity, in its extreme forms, is believing delusions, believing something is true when actually it's not. So, what I'd like to talk to you about today is how Neo-Advaita is incomplete. So someone recently said to me that they were reading some Adi Shankara. And for those of you who don't know, Adi Shankara is the first, again, in Indian non-duality, the first person to systematically write down the philosophy of non-duality. And not just the philosophy, but the practice of it. And this person was reading Adi Shankara, and they said that they were a little concerned because it seemed very world-denying to them. And so this is partially a response video to that comment. So the thing is, in traditional non-duality, studying Adi Shankara is the final step in a very long process. And also, in traditional non-duality, you would never study on Adi Shankara on your own. In fact, you would never study any philosophical topic on your own. There are certain texts, very basic texts, that it's theoretically okay and safe to study on your own. And it's so interesting. I don't even know how to put into words the different mentality of how traditional non-duality is taught. It's taught on an individual basis or in very small groups to highly motivated and highly qualified people by a highly qualified teacher who can read Sanskrit, who is well versed in a couple of classical texts and then commentaries on that text, because it's very easy to draw false conclusions. One of them being, and this isn't to criticize this person, I did it, and many of us who were engaged in Neo-Advaita did it, and we were falsely taught by the Neo-Advaita teachers. It can appear that these texts deny the world. And there are certain lines and certain statements that, if you don't take it in the big picture, seem to completely deny the world. So the thing is that in traditional Advaita Vedanta, these philosophical texts and these big ideas that are talked about over and over and over in satsang, like you are consciousness or the world doesn't exist. So first of all, traditional Advaita doesn't teach that at all. That's a complete mistranslation. But regardless, the ephemeral nature of the world and the oneness of you and everything. These ideas in traditional Advaita are mentioned at the beginning, but they're not dwelt upon. After they're mentioned, then there's a very systematic process of getting the person ready to ultimately experience and live these deep, profound spiritual and mystical truths. So I'm currently studying, under the guidance of a guru, I'm studying a very traditional text. And once the second line of the text talks about what are the prerequisites to even study this text. It's a very traditional thing in Indian philosophy as a whole, and also in Advaita. And by the way, to my live viewers, if you have any questions or comments, please type those in. I believe the Sanskrit word is the adhikari. Yes, that's correct, the adhikari. So the adhikari, for most of these deep non-dual texts and for these practices such as self-inquiry, are very high, very, very high. Shankara lists four things that are essential to pursue these final parts of the non-dual path. Again, most of the path is actually just the preparation for self-inquiry and for contemplation and reflection on these very deep topics. Let's see, one moment. So according to Shankara, before you practice self-inquiry, before you dive into these deep philosophical texts, there's four things that you need to do. And I'm going to provide a link to all this so you can read it for yourself. I'll go over them briefly. First and foremost, and again, these things are not to be done on your own, according to traditional Advaita Vedanta, because it's very easy to mislead yourself and to fall for illusion, deception, which is what Maya is. So the first thing is discernment between the real and unreal. See, right there, here's where a guru is needed, because real in Advaita, Advaita Vedanta wasn't taught in English. Real and unreal are English words. The Sanskrit words are sat and asat. Sat means eternal and unchanging. Asat means changing. So in traditional Advaita Vedanta, there's this idea that the world doesn't exist. It is not even part of the teaching. It's a complete misteaching. So first there's this inquiry, again, under the guidance of the guru, into the ephemeral nature of the world. Ephemeral means constantly changing. It doesn't mean non-existent. And that happiness, and this is the key piece, that lasting happiness, there's no lasting happiness in any object. This is a very profound philosophical undertaking, and again, not something to be done on one's own. Then the next step is detachment or dispassion. Once again, here a guru is needed, because it's very easy to draw the conclusion I did, and many other people have as well. Well, okay, well, if there's no lasting happiness in the world, then I'm just going to turn away from the world. That's not how it works. It's not how it works at all. It's an organic process of detachment, of dropping attachment, not dropping the world, not dropping worldly activities. Trying to suppress desire is the quickest way to flame up desire. It'll always work in the short term. It'll come back and bite you in the end. The third step is the cultivation of six qualities. One moment. Detachment from sense objects, withdrawing the sense organs from the objects. I'm sorry, I'm not going to go over the six qualities. I wish I'd had them prepared. You can take a peek here. But one of the six things that is essential, Adi Shankara says, if you do not do this, you cannot succeed on the non-dual path, is doing your duty. Dharma is one of the central ideas of Indian philosophy. Dharma means taking care of your responsibilities. It means being a good member of a family. It means identifying your unique talents and then contributing them to the world. It also means to live in harmony with the world, with the environment, with your family, with your neighbors. It's truly a holistic way of life, of relating harmoniously. And Adi Shankara says, if you do not do this thing, you cannot succeed on the non-dual path. And of course, Neo-Advaita teachers completely throw that out. No, you don't need to do anything other than just inquire. Or even worse, you don't need to even inquire because you're already enlightened. So I've said it before and I'll say it again. What Neo-Advaita teachers teach, it's its own thing, because it's in complete contradiction to what Adi Shankara taught and even what Ramana Maharshi taught. The Neo-Advaita teachers will cherry pick. They'll selectively quote a line here and there that seems to bolster their cause, but that's what religious people do, right? Like Protestant Christians, the second largest Christian denomination, will take one or two lines and say, well, all you have to do is accept Jesus. And then they'll throw out everything else. It's like making a religion out of a few sentences and then throwing out the rest of the book. And that's exactly what Neo-Advaita teachers will do, is they'll take one sentence of Ramana Maharshi and make a whole religion out of it in a way that then negates many other things that he said. And then the fundamental, I want to say paradigm, but the fundamental philosophy and practice that Adi Shankara taught, which Ramana Maharshi affirmed over and over and over. He spoke of it. So Neo-Advaita is kind of two things. It's many things. It's incomplete, and I've shared some of the ways that it's incomplete. It's the tail end of a very long, rigorous, thorough process. And to boot, it's a distorted version of that tail end. It's not even, it'd be one thing if it was the authentic tail end. And every now and then you'll find a few teachers who will teach teach that tail end authentically. And by tail end, I mean the philosophy and the practice of self-inquiry, some of the deeper philosophy. But they don't teach the process that's needed to integrate it into your day-to-day life. And one of the key parts of that is Dharma. The other key part of that is all these preparatory practices that I've given an overview to, and I've provided a link for you to check out for yourself. So, okay, why should you believe me? I'm just one more joker on the internet sharing my opinion, right? Well, there's a couple reasons I think you should. One is you can go read Adi Shankara in the Bhagavad Gita and see if what I am saying is in alignment with those things. Next, I hesitate to mention this because I don't want people to sort of blindly, I want people to discern for themselves. But an actual Hindu Swami has said that he supports and encourages me to continue doing what I'm doing and that what I'm teaching is correct. That's not him saying that I'm a guru. That's not him saying I'm enlightened. I'm not. But an actual Advaita Vedanta teacher, who I consider to be enlightened, you'd have to find out for yourself, has said that he supports and encourages my work. No Neo-Advaita teacher can make that claim. They're completely on their own. But in the end, the way I began to recover from Neo-Advaita was to study actual Advaita. And I was able to make a little bit of progress doing that on my own. Specifically, I studied a text by Adi Shankara called The Crescent Jewel of Discrimination. It's considered one of the fundamental Advaita Vedanta texts. And the other thing is I read Day by Day with Bhagavan, which was an unedited account of Ramana Maharshi's talks. Reading these things, I could clearly see that it was completely different from what was being offered in Neo-Advaita satsangs. Completely different, night and day. I also had the advantage, however, that I was already a little bit medium educated in traditional Indian Vedic philosophy. So that was, but I only got so far with that. And then I began to study with actual traditional Advaita teachers. So I feel like there's something else I want to say. Just a moment, please. It was and continues to be a very deep process of recovering from Neo-Advaita. It truly is brainwashing. I took it very seriously, and it took me very far down, very, very far down the suffering. And not just suffering, but into existential despair. Because Neo-Advaita is like this weird mind trap that once you've stepped into the trap, it's very hard to think outside the trap. Just kind of, it's kind of like a religion. Once you accept a religion is true, especially a fundamentalist or very conservative religion, it's very hard to escape that because there's all these built-in mental traps to keep you stuck in it. That's also how cults operate. There's not a huge difference between a conservative fundamentalist religion and a cult, in my view. So for me, it wasn't and hasn't been an overnight matter of exiting Neo-Advaita. I can say that I've exited Neo-Advaita and now I'm in the recovery process, the recovery phase. But even exiting Neo-Advaita was not easy. So the path I've taken has been to study traditional non-duality. I don't know if that's the path that everyone that will work for other people. I believe that everyone needs to learn at least some traditional non-duality. That doesn't mean that they're going to practice non-duality for the rest of their lives or it's their path. But for myself, I had to learn, okay, what is actual non-duality to help unhook? Because over and over and over at Neo-Advaita, it's told, this is the supreme truth. This is the only way. This is the only way. Talk about conservative religious talk right there. All paths lead to this. This is what was taught by all the sages. It's repeated over and over and over again that the only way I could see those things as untrue and for me to let go of Neo-Advaita was to learn enough traditional non-duality to do so. So thank you so much to my live viewers. Thank you to everyone who took the time to watch this video. And I used to wish people a good Neo-Advaita free day, but instead I'll wish people a good day of discernment between Neo-Advaita and traditional Advaita and some progress in recovering. I'd like to close actually with, so my two, I've had one-on-one contact with traditional Advaita teachers. The first one, our first conversation, after we said hello, this first person's question was, what do you do for a living? How are things with your family? That was their first question. It was very poignant because traditional non-duality is integrative. So I was approaching this person as a teacher, and this teacher, in their very wise way, was like, well, if I'm going to, I don't know their motive, but I can guess, if I'm going to teach this person, I need to know where they fit into society. It's a very traditional Advaita thing, is to get to know the student and to understand their responsibilities. The second teacher, who I'm studying with right now, one of the first things they had us do was to do a character strength test so we could understand our gifts and our virtues, because in traditional Advaita Vedanta, the path of doing your duty is identifying your strengths and then doing them as a form of service. It's so fundamental. And yet this was not only not taught in Neo-Advaita, ideas like this would be vigorously attacked and denied in Neo-Advaita, because Neo-Advaita is about a dissociative state of consciousness that left me and many others completely lost, untethered, and not integrated into this world. Because Neo-Advaita is nihilism. It's a denial of this world. It's a denial of all meaning. It's a denial of our uniqueness. Whereas traditional Advaita is, the foundation of it is understanding the role of the individual to the whole and the integration of the individual into the whole. Neo-Advaita is like, let's get high on spiritual practices and philosophies. Traditional Advaita is, let's learn a way of life that integrates, that lives oneness. Because if we're all one, then living in a harmonious, then if we're all one, and for the quote individual to realize that, they're going to have to learn how to live in cooperation with everything. And that can't be done just through getting high and dissociating through a meditative practice and thinking thoughts like, I don't exist and the world doesn't exist. That'll absolutely get you high and dissociated, and it'll work in the short term to solve your problems. But traditional non-duality is a way of life, not a not a quick fix. Thank you so very much for joining in. Wish everyone a blessed, blessed day. Take care.